to another edition of the Best Business Minds, where we interview business leaders and academics that write thought-provoking books. I'm Marc Kramer, a serial entrepreneur who consults with family businesses and entrepreneurs. And currently, as you all know, I'm teaching entrepreneurship at Vinh University in Hanoi, Vietnam. Today, please welcome Wayne Clark, author of the book, How to Become a World-Class Manager. And we are speaking to Wayne, who is in London, England. Wayne, welcome.
Hi, Mark. Good to be here. Thank you very much.
Well, we're so glad to have you. Really enjoyed the book. So let's start off with you telling us about your professional background.
Sure. I began as an economist many moons ago and then went to work for Arthur Andersen as they were before things happened, if you remember, with Enron.
Yeah, yes, of course.
Yeah, I was at Arthur Andersen for a while and then Deloitte. And then I went to another consulting firm and then to BDO, another accountancy firm. So I spent about 10, 11 years in professional service firms as an advisor around employee engagement and communications within those companies. I then left to run a consulting business based on employee engagement feedback. So I spent 5 years giving feedback to CEOs of hundreds of different companies based on their employee feedback. So as you can imagine, sometimes that was really good, right? Because I'm here to say, hey, Mark, I've just surveyed 10,000 of your staff. They love you, Mark. And the CEO would say, I like this guy. This is a good guy. Or equally, I've surveyed 10,000 of your staff. They really don't like you, Mark. And they'd say, I don't like this guy. We'd argue about the survey and the quality of the questions and so on. And then one of the things that we saw in there, which was consistent in nearly every organization we looked at, was this challenge around the manager score. So we knew from looking at the data, and we'd analyzed at that point over 1 million people's worth of feedback in the survey. And we could tell that there was a very clear correlation between if you improve the quality of the score of how people felt about their line manager, the overall score of the engagement survey went up. Even we drew very clear conclusions in a company that's now owned by the London Stock Exchange, did some analysis and looked at 37 companies that were listed on this list who were listed on the stock exchange. And they tracked them over a 5-year fund. And the results were quite compelling because it said, if you invested $100 in those companies over 5 years, your $100 would be worth around $450. If you invested the same $100 in a sort of all FTSE, as we would call it, share index, or like an S&P 500, it would be worth around $120. So the difference was huge. And what we were more interested in was why was that the case? And we tended to find that most of those companies had really strong manager scores. So it sort of led me down a path where we did more investigation and looking into what this manager thing's about, mainly because most of the CEOs we met with kept saying, I want world-class managers, Wayne. And I would sit this side of the table and say, well, that makes a lot of sense. Who wouldn't? And then about 10 years ago, we asked a very basic, simple question, which is, well, what is a world-class manager? And then we conducted some research. We went all the way from New Zealand through to Vancouver, interviewing CEOs, HR directors, frontline managers, frontline teams, and asking them the same question, what in your opinion is a world-class manager? We took those insights, built a program called World Class Manager, funnily enough, and then we've launched that now over the last 8 years. So over 100,000 managers in more than 50 countries now have been through our program.
So why did you write this book? I mean, is it basically based on the research that you had done?
Yeah, there was a few reasons. One was at the beginning of this process, what I wanted to try and do was create something that was in some way disruptive. I lecture at a couple of different business schools here and also in the Middle East. And, they've got their place, of course, but I think a lot of the essential knowledge about how to drive great teams, what great team performance looks like is very basic and quite simple, and actually doesn't require that much depth of education because much of it is, can be followed and replicated. So part of building World Class Manager was in some way an attempt to democratize this type of knowledge and make it accessible as possible. And the book was for me then another step. So the publisher came to us, Kogan Page, and asked if we would be interested to produce the book, write the book. And I'd never considered doing it before. It wasn't part of a bucket list plan of ours. But we thought, actually, this is a great way. It means that we can take all these insights and make this available for $15 or whatever it is around the world. So that was our way to try and condense it and make it even more available than it already is in our platform.
That's fantastic. So let's start off in the beginning of the book. Regarding the shift to empathy in management, you discuss Rita Gunther's McGrath's idea of the era of empathy in management. And maybe you need to tell us a little bit about who Rita Gunther McGrath is. How can managers effectively balance empathy with the need for operational efficiency and productivity, especially in today's fast-paced corporate environment?
Well, we looked at something quite interesting, which was a study done as part of a BBC journalist piece about 6, 7 years ago. And it was an investigation into looking at the shortening of the attention span. And it's interesting for us because we've looked at two different sort of views of this. One looking at what the BBC had found out in this particular article, and another we work with a university in London who employ a huge faculty of neuroscience experts. We were looking at what's happening in terms of the shortening of the attention span. And the question that the article poses is, is the attention span of human beings becoming shorter? And it was referencing goldfish. So they think, a goldfish attention span is around 9 seconds. How you study that, I'm not quite sure, but they think it's that. And they suspect that human beings' attention span was now a second below a goldfish. So, if we apply that, so we've got no chance, right? If we apply that to our working world, in the real world of work, where companies have got a ton of messages to try and fit through a very small, narrow pipe of attention that people have, the degree to which the organization can then empathize with where the individual's coming from, and also, of course, for the individual and for the manager to empathize in terms of what the capacity of their team feels like in order to get this messaging through is key. And we also then looked at another angle, which was, we know that there is so many competing factions for your attention, as we talked about, as I'm sure, on many different social channels. But we see this day in, day out in organizations. You've got a CEO who's got a very clear message to articulate and share with as many people as possible across the organization. And it's like, you go away with your leadership team and create this beautifully crafted strategic message. You and the team love it. You all agree this is fantastic. You go back to, the rest of the people in the organization. I'm sort of there on my phone. You're trying to talk to me and I'm like, sorry, what was that? And that's exactly where the whole thing falls apart. So, we focused a lot on, from an empathy point of view of trying to understand where people are at, what bandwidth they actually have, and how does that change the way that we should think about engaging and communicating with them? Because most organizations accept this as a fact, but they still employ the identical methods of communicating and engaging with people.
I'm still trying to process the fact that we're just behind goldfish in our attention span, but actually I thought the goldfish would have a longer attention span longer one than we do. So I'm surprised that we're ahead of them. Engagement and leadership. You emphasize that critical role of managers engaging their teams and fostering a positive work environment. Could you elaborate on specific strategies or examples where managers successfully improve their team engagement, particularly in challenging or remote work settings, which companies are battling right now? Some of them are forcing people to come back, in governmental agencies or forcing people back into the office. So talk about that, please.
Yeah, we're seeing this around the world as well. I've just come back from working across South Africa, and also we work quite a lot in the Middle East. And we're seeing this in every location. Employers are demanding that people come back into the office, and there is this constant tension, of course. I don't think there's an easy answer to it. But how to drive the productivity, especially where you've got people in a remote situation, is interesting for us. So I'll rewind back to the beginning of lockdown, because we got embroiled in being asked by lots and lots of companies we work with to host sessions with their managers to focus on how to engage people in this new remote situation. The interesting thing was, Mark, that the organizations who tended not to struggle with engagement and with sort of team cohesion tended to not ask us to do those things. And we were interested in kind of why is that the case? And what we then found, of course, is, again, you get back to the manager relationship, because the manager relationship largely is king. We found that managers who had good, strong relationships with their team before lockdown, who were doing the right things anyway, like regular engagement, good communication, good team briefings, good quality one-to-ones with the team, tended not to have an issue. The reason why was because their relationships were pretty strong. So, as we know in our personal lives, good relationships can bear a ton of stress. Bad relationships break real easy. And what we'd found is actually it wasn't the remote working issue. It was more to do with the quality of the manager relationships and how much effort and energy do managers, or are they prepared to invest into strengthening the relationship with the people in their teams. And again, I think that for me is the answer. But so, if you're going to try and drive productivity, it might take another 3 to 6 months, but you've got to get the relationship right with the individuals in the team, which usually requires much more time investment made into understanding who they are, where they're coming from, where they might want to get to. And then one of the exercises, and maybe we can go into this a bit later, but one of the exercises we did through lockdown is I conducted a number of one-to-ones with random strangers. I was sitting in my garage as everyone else was, losing my mind. And I thought, it'd be nice to meet some different people other than the team. So I did random stranger one-to-ones, which was fascinating. So I can share some of the insights around that maybe later.
No, feel free to share it now.
So one of the things I did was I asked them to do two things, really. One was to share with me their life story. And I put out a post on LinkedIn and said, it'd be great if anyone wants to have a one-to-one with me. People, we're all going through a tough time. I'd love to do it. So I've got 20,000 connections and a lot more on Facebook. So I've got quite a few people come back. I selected 10 strangers and I did 10 random one-to-ones. And what we did for the exercise is I said my commitment was I would give you 2 hours of time. And during those 2 hours, we're going to do a couple of things. The first hour is going to be spent where I would like you to share with me your entire life story. Start at the beginning and go through till now. Share with me what you're prepared to share. Obviously, we don't know each other, so please feel free to share what you're happy to. And let's go for it. And they said, where do you want me to begin? I said, well, as far back as you're happy to, and let's do it. So the first hour was them sharing with me their entire life story. And then the second hour, we got into more of a sort of a reflection conversation. I'm not a coach. I don't profess to be a coach. So this wasn't a coaching call, but it was more that I wanted to just listen and see what reflections could happen. The reason why I did the exercise is because someone did this with me a few years before. And it was so powerful because the act of talking through your life story was so remarkable because your life story is probably the most important story for most human beings. And you think about when have you had an opportunity to sit with someone that you not either know or don't know and share with them your entire life story? It's not often you get to do that, like for an hour. I've been married 25 years. My wife doesn't care less. She's sick of my life story and she knows the potted history of it, but maybe not the full thing. I'm not sat and talked it through. My friends aren't interested or my colleagues. But it was wonderful for people to have an opportunity to share their story. And what happens is you share your story, and as they did every single time, as they're talking things aloud, they keep having these realization moments. Oh my God, I totally forgot that I played guitar in a band for 5 years. I totally forgot I climbed Everest, or I did this, I did that. And they start to reconnect with these amazing experiences and things that built them, things that give them a tremendous amount of confidence. And the second thing is that they also start to get a ton of insight about why they react to people in the way that they do. Kevin in the office is lousy, but actually now I get it. The reason why I react to Kevin like that is because it reminds me of so-and-so that I dealt with years before, and I have an issue with that guy. So, there was a ton of personal reflections which came out, which we found was a really valuable exercise for them to do. And it's exactly the same thing. It doesn't necessarily need to take 2 hours. It could take an hour. But it's something that we would recommend that all managers do with their team, because how much do you know people? And I've put this to the test. So final thing on this. We went to a construction business, which is in, for any of you know the geography, Wales, which is far to the west of London, well, England, Wales. And we had a construction business where, if you think about it, this maybe sound a bit sexist, I've got to tread careful here, but you think with men, often when you sit down and you ask people to go through this exercise, I find that women are much more interested to conduct such an exercise than men, especially men in a construction industry. Picture the stereotype. And I said, right, guys, we're going to sit and talk with each other for a couple of hours about our life story. You can see their face, like they want to kill me. So anyway, the guys did it. And then at the end of it, which happens every single time you do this, is these guys said, I've worked with this guy for 25 years. I had no idea about him, because we think we sit next to each other. We talk a lot. We go to the pub a lot. We drink a lot together. I don't know the guy.
Yeah, I think people, when they get together, they don't talk about substantive things. They talk about how the football team is done, what's going on in the news, what's happened at work, and the gossip. But nobody really talks about how they feel about things, about how things are going in their lives, and so forth. They try to get away from it all, right?
Yeah, for sure.
What was the biggest surprise that you found when you were doing this survey? Like, was there any aha moments, or was there anything like, I never would have considered that?
I think the largest, the most significant thing, I think, was how simplistic the solution is. So, like, it's often made much more complex and more difficult than it really needs to be. So so again, another example, this is in the book actually. We went to they're a contact center business, so call center. They've got thousands of people up in the northeast of England. And we went up and we knew that the engagement scores across the organization were pretty varied. And then we had 60 of their managers in the room. And we knew that one of them was this total outlier in the data. So if you looked at his scores, the team loved him, exceptional engagement scores and so on. So I asked him to stand up and I asked a really dumb question in retrospect. And the question I asked him was, what do you do that works so well? Because anyone I found that you meet who does something really well can't really explain it because it's so natural to them. They don't see it as like that they're doing it well. So he sort of didn't really know how to answer it. I said, okay, maybe another way is, could you talk me through Monday to Friday? What do you do? What does a week in your life look like? And he said, well, on Monday, I spend most of my time on Monday going around the teams and checking in with them on how last week was. And I talked with them about the targets for this week. So one of the other managers put his hand up and said, oh, so you only work 4 days a week? And the rest of the other 59 managers laughed, right? And I was like, well, no, I work 5 days a week, but I spend most of Monday engaging with the team. And I asked the CEO afterwards, I said, on all of your measures around call handling stats, customer satisfaction, everything that you would measure, how's this guy doing? And he said he beats every manager hands down on everything that we do, everything that we measure. Everything that he did was unbelievably simplistic, so formulaic. The difference was, like many things, he does it and he does it consistently and it works. And I think often this is made to be much more complex than it is.
Can you really build culture without people coming into an office? I mean, I don't see how you get to really know people and how to and build culture, and also for people to rise up in an organization. If you're doing everything remotely, how do they get to even grade your abilities?
Yeah, it's difficult. For sure it's difficult because, we've been interacting face to face as organisms for a long time, right? So changing that to digital within the last few years is nothing in comparison to whatever version of creation story we've all got. So I think that's always going to have its inherent challenges. However, I do think there are some things we can do to try and limit the downsides of not being together face to face. And I think that's the degree to which we can try to understand where we're coming from. And again, as we would talk about understanding the hopes, dreams and ambitions of people in the team, I think is really important. Because if you look at the nature of many online interaction conversations, I mean, they're tremendously transactional.
In the book, you talk about value creation, strategic alignment, and being seen as a value creator is highlighted as essential for modern managers. How can managers ensure that they stay aligned with an organization's strategic goals while also fostering innovation and creativity within their teams, especially large organizations?
Yeah, we find the further you go away from the CEO by grade and geographical distance, the weirder the story becomes. So most CEOs you meet with, as I'm sure you will attest to too in your work and working with many family businesses, CEOs are generally pretty clear in terms of what it is that they want, as are the rest of the leadership team or the board. The further you go away from them by geographical distance and by grade, the weirder the story becomes. And we found this time and time again in all sorts of organizations. The key, as we found, is how do we then help as many managers as possible to try to understand the organization as close as possible to the way that the CEO does, which might sound a bit difficult, but actually it's not really that difficult. And we know it's not to do, so let's look at it the other way around. Why is it that most CEOs understand the strategy better than anyone else, the vision, the values, the mission, the objectives, the goals? Is it because they've got higher IQ than other people? No. Is it because they work harder than other people? No. So many of those variables I don't think are true. What is true for sure is that they're much closer to the context. Organizational visions by default have usually been designed by a small group of people in a nice location who have a very clear shared understanding of what that is. And it's based on a day or 2 days worth of debate, discussion, dialogue, agreement, disagreement, and they reach a consensus, right? Which is a shared consensus that they all kind of get. The challenge is then that consensus gets taken for the rest of the organization, pushed down an intranet, or maybe if you're lucky, you get some sort of video with a plant in the background, and it's distributed to everyone across the organization to try and make sense of something in a series of words that was never just about the words. It's all about the meaning and the discussion and the conversation. So I think for managers, as we've looked at, we've got to try and make sure that we can help as many managers as possible This is our challenge question to CEOs, to understand the strategy as you would understand it. And I think there's some very simple ways that that is achievable.
Regarding the SMART goal setting model, you
Mm.
emphasize the importance of goals being specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. How would you advise managers to prioritize these elements when setting goals, especially in a dynamic work environments where priorities are constantly shifting, especially entrepreneurial and
Yeah.
technology companies?
Yeah, I mean, even my first experience at Arthur Andersen, I worked for a very forward-thinking guy. I joined Andersen in 1999. And this guy was the first ever person who said to me, he said, where do you see yourself in 9 months? I said, 9 months? Every other person I've met says 5 years. And he said, well, 9 months, because, we're in sort of ERP implementation period of the late 90s where we're doing things for the first time that we've never done before. I mean, this was as technologically rapid and changing as is today with crypto, I think in many cases. So, they'd already accepted that the cycle time needs to come down because this is a real issue. So I think having regular reviews to try and make sure that we can get this into the sort of hearts and minds of people and understand it is really important.
Question from the audience. What are strategies for managers to begin the vision, mission, and goals from the lens of the CEO?
So a couple of steps to take, I would recommend based on what we've had the experience of doing. And this is based on a real story. It's based on real experience. It's not like a third-hand story. This is something I was involved in for about 2 years. And the result was awesome. We managed to grow the organization by plus 20% organically for 2 years in a row. And we also had a dramatic improvement in the employee engagement score. So we went from being the bottom 10 of the top 100 companies to work for to the top 20 within 18 months, actually, by doing this exact thing I'm going to explain. So first thing is we tried to understand what the leadership team understand about the strategy. And that wasn't by looking at the board papers, because often, as we know, before senior leadership team meetings, HR, IT, operations run around, they produce these amazing papers and packs and decks, often in larger companies anyway, to prepare for senior exec, exco, excom, SLT meetings, whatever we call the leadership team. Often what happens in those meetings is those papers are kind of ignored, not because people want to ignore them, but because there are burning issues that really sit in the hearts and minds of most leadership team members. So my first recommendation, and this is what we did, is we sat through about 7 different leadership team meetings and we tried to capture the essence, not like a mind map, by just recording and thinking through what are these guys actually talking about? If we were to replicate the same conversation that this leadership team are having with a frontline team manager or team supervisor or shift leader, if you're in a manufacturing environment, how could we boil this stuff down into something that means something for the more junior managers in the organization? So after 7 sessions, we reached a conclusion of what they discussed. We then took those issues and said, right, let's help all of the managers, regardless of whether they're junior or senior, to sit with a team of people, and the conversation would probably need to take anywhere between 45 minutes to an hour, and sit and discuss some of those key issues. So some of those key issues, for example, might be understanding your strategy, could be one of them. Understanding what the level of customer feedback or client feedback your organization is receiving from its customers and clients. One of those things could be looking at the competitive landscape in your market. One of them could be looking at the mix of clients or customers you serve. And in many cases, most organizations want to shift and change that over time. One of those things could be around the successes you've had. One of those things could be around your employee engagement feedback. One of those things could be around sort of what the competition are up to. So I think there's like 6 or 7 pretty big themes here, which are quite consistent in most organizations. And we took a piece of paper with these 6 or 7 big themes on. We asked managers to sit round together over the process of about a week across the organization. This was done across about 3,000 people. And we asked them to sit with their teams and discuss these big 7 things. And it's really simple. There's 3 layers to it, right? To think about if you're going to do this in your company. First layer is, let's discuss what these big things mean for the organization. And that's kind of interesting. And then we asked the so what question. So what? What does that mean for our team? And that might be we're in HR or IT or in ops or in customer service delivery or whatever part of the business we're in. Let's discuss for the second part of the conversation what all of this stuff means for our team. And then the final part, which is the sort of golden thread, the aha moment for most people, is now let's discuss what it means for me personally. And the way to do this, and we learned this by hindsight, not by foresight, is to sequence this type of conversation. So it should happen maybe 2 to 4 weeks before your regular round of staff one-to-ones or performance reviews, because the goal is you want, I would imagine, everyone in your organization. If Mark is my line manager, I'm sitting with Mark every 3 months and we're going to have a conversation about what the organizational mission, vision, goal is, what that means for our particular part of the company, and then ultimately, what does that mean for Wayne's objectives, development plan, focus over the next quarter or 6 months? So there's a very simple way of aligning my effort with what we're trying to achieve as an organization. Unbelievably simple, doesn't take very long. And we did this every 6 months as an entire organization. And it had a rapid impact on our engagement scores and communication, as you would imagine, because we're rewiring the way that we talk as a company. Long answer, but hopefully that explains how to do it.
No, it was good. And especially since we tape it so they can watch it again and listen to it. On the topic of visualization, the chapter discusses the effectiveness of visualization in achieving goals. Could you elaborate on how managers can encourage their teams to incorporate visualization techniques into their goal setting processes? Are there specific strategies or exercises you recommend for implementing this effectively?
Well, one of the questions we love is, and it's a very simple sort of naive question again, but one of the questions that we like to ask people is, what do you want to be famous for? What do you want to be famous for? And it's an interesting question to ask because it starts to give people a little bit of a sense of ambition. Often, and I experienced this when I joined Arthur Andersen. This is like maybe a bit of a negative story, but I'm English, right? So we have a lot of cynicism here. But when I joined Arthur Andersen, this guy who was like, he wasn't my direct manager, but he was a senior manager. He sort of put his arm around me and said, "See those people over there?" And I'm looking at them. He's like, "They're dead. They died years ago. They're zombies. They're walking dead. Their dreams died years ago, but they're still around." And, and he said to me, and I'm sure it's a common saying, he said, "Some people quit and leave and some quit and stay." They quit and stayed. And, one of the things that we looked at was everyone tends to, and I've not yet found a human being, and, we've worked with thousands of people, as you have, Mark. I've not yet found anyone on the planet who doesn't have some sense of a dream or an ambition or a goal. Some people are buried deeper than others, and it requires a bit more digging, but everyone's got something there. And I think, what we look at is, let's try and uncover that, which is often the way in to be able to solve the very thing that we're talking about here.
Are good managers ones that really spend time understanding that they're just not looking at the corporate goals, but realizing that the people that they're managing day to day, they really have to get significant insights into them in order to maximize their skill set and productivity?
Yes, I would absolutely agree with that. And I would add to this that you also then want to make sure that you're selecting, I think this is one of the most contentious issues with many organizations, that you're selecting the right type of people who should be people managers. So if you're a sort of technical or specialist manager and you don't necessarily have a team of other human beings and it's a work focused sort of area, then maybe it doesn't matter so much. But if you do have an impact in terms of other human beings' performance and engagement and outcomes, I think selecting those managers carefully is really important. Again, maybe this is a UK thing, probably is, but we had a guy once tell me, this is a true story, that he promoted someone to manager because they were a solid drinker. So it's commendable. But there's all sorts of weird reasons why people get promoted to manager. I was there long enough. I was there longer than you. Therefore, I deserve this promotion, and I get it. It's the only way the organization can justify often a pay rise. Therefore, that's the reason. There are all sorts of reasons why people get promoted to manager, and often they're not necessarily the right ones.
Yeah, right. I mean, I didn't hear merit based on any of those descriptions.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are some, of course. I'm giving the extremities here, but I think there's
of course.
Yeah.
But how many times have we been in organizations and wonder how this person ever rose to be a supervisor, let alone a VP in the company?
Well, I think again, if I was to be really cynical, I think a lot of employment in itself is created because of people can't be bothered with things. I don't want to do that. And we noticed this, I run a small company. We've got a small team of 15 people. With a small business, we have to do the things. Perhaps if we had, more revenue, then I might say that thing that I don't really like doing very much, I'm going to employ someone to do, which, is kind of unnecessary. But And I think that's a part of it. And then often the selection process is fundamentally flawed because people aren't thinking it through. I mean, we've got so many examples. Just a quick story. Again, this was another company who asked us to go and sit in these sessions with their managers. And there was a lady who sat in the corner of the room, sort of arms crossed, looking tired and bored. And I said to her, I was trying to find the words to ask, how did you become a manager here? Because like, there's no way in hell I would have put you in a management position. Yeah. Anyway, so I said, I was trying to find the words, and I asked somewhere, I said, how did you become a manager? And she said, well, I was temporary. And then they asked me if I wanted to go permanent. And I said, yeah, I might as well. And then I said to her, so what happened? Like between Friday to Monday when they promoted you, I mean, did you get any support? Did you get any guidance? No. And then afterwards, her manager says to me, oh, we've got some really low energy managers, Wayne. It's a real challenge for us. You're like, oh my God. But what sort of Inspector Clouseau do you need to be to see that this person is not right when it comes to firing up the rest of the team in a business which is a contact center business designed to sell and deliver great customer service? It's insane.
And somebody didn't want to put the energy into it, so they go, she's been around for a while, let's just promote her.
She's breathing. She'll do.
Yeah. So celebrating successes, celebrating and recognizing successes is highlighted as crucial for motivation, no doubt about that. Could you share examples of how managers can tailor recognition efforts to different types of achievements or individual preferences within their teams, and how did those efforts contribute to the long-term motivation and goal achievement? Especially, you have to be authentic when you do this.
For sure. I've got a wonderful example of this actually, which is a company. They're a hotelier. They have 20 hotels, a boutique hotel company. They've got about 3,500 staff, 5 hotels in the UK. I'll name them actually because I think they're worthy of being named. It's an awesome organization called Red Carnation Hotels. If you've never heard of them, check them out. They tend to win pretty much every industry award for exceptional hotels. The really amazing thing is if you look at TripAdvisor in London, in Geneva, in Cape Town, in Florida, in Ireland, every single location Red Carnation has a hotel, they're number 1 on TripAdvisor, largely. I mean, it's impossible. There's hardly any other hotel chain that can claim the level of customer feedback success that they've had. So I'll give you a quick story which talks about the recognition part of this. One of the things that I saw them do is I went to a staff awards party a number of years ago, and there was a guy who gets an award for something, and as he sort of jumps up on stage to get this award, I don't know if you ever remember The Price is Right, Come On Down. Remember that show,
yes,
right?
Yes, of course.
And people, they said they won, I don't know, a crystal. They won like a crystal decanter, and they lose their mind and throw themselves through the audience, right? It was that sort of thing. So this guy throws himself across the dance floor to get this award. And then I said to the guy next to me, like, what does he get? Does he get like a car? What does he get? And they said, no, he gets like, there's this little plaque and it says Best Front of House Smiles Award. I said, you what? Is that it? Best Front of House Smiles Award. And what the thing was is they looked through their entire value chain, right? And we've seen this in a few companies do this really well. If you think about your stay in a hotel, what happens at the beginning? If you're going to go and stay in a nice hotel, you're going to be greeted by someone who'll probably open your car door for you. Someone who will bring you into the hotel, then you've got check-in desk, then you've got someone bring the bags to your rooms, on and on and on, right? To the final point of checkout and then reviewing the hotel. What they did is they looked through every single role that's represented in that value creation chain and said, what do we need to do to recognize the brilliance of that role? Now, for me, this is real genius because what it means is you're not only recognizing the operational part, but you're also recognizing the back house or back of house functions that go into enabling all of those great things to happen. So in many organizations, you have these kind of like weird, and I experience this working in accountancy firms. You've definitely got, as they call them, fee earners and fee burners, right? So you've got the guys who make the cash and you've got all the corporate functions, and there is this quite natural and persistent issue between both camps. What this organization does is they recognize every single part of the value chain that creates value, identify what it is that we can recognize people for, and they've developed a series of awards down that entire value chain. It's one of the only organizations I've seen actually do it, and it's phenomenal. So again, if you want to look at outcomes of that type of culture, again, if you're a service delivery focused organization, which most of us are, this is really an organization to go and learn from. The founder is a lady called Beatrice Tolman. and has written an amazing book. It's like a sort of love affair with hotels, based out of South Africa. She's originally from Cape Town, I believe. But an exceptional story of how they've created a culture. And again, it's heavily based, Mark, on recognizing the brilliance of people and really valuing and celebrating the successes of people too.
I think that's what you see in any good service organization is that
For sure.
they can see that in people and bring the most out of them and compliment them for that. Adaptability and leadership. Andrew Sellies highlights the importance of adaptability and flexibility in leadership, especially in the face of unexpected challenges like COVID.
Mm.
Could you share more examples or strategies that he used to lead Bidcorp UK through such rapid change? And how did balance strategic planning with the need for immediate adoption during the crisis?
Well, there was two things. One with, I mean, Andrew Selly is again of the 1,000 or so CEOs I've had the opportunity to engage with, work with, meet with. I'd place him up there right at the top. I mean, he's an exceptional CEO. Before lockdown, so this is probably 2000 when I first met him, I don't know, 2017, 18. One of the things that he was doing was he was looking around the business at where's performing really well. So Bid Food in the UK at the time, I think, if the numbers are right, I think they had about 24 different distribution depots, food depots around the country. And there's a few of them that are higher performing than the others and all sorts of measures. One of the things that he did is he started to look at which one of those are performing really well, learning lessons from the ones that are performing really well, documented it and put it into a process called service excellence. And the service excellence program went all the way through the company as a huge, national cultural change program, performance change program in the organization, and really revitalized that entire business. So it was quite, and this was very public. They had a huge client in the past, which they'd lost. And they're a business of, I think, 6 or so thousand people, which had a massive impact on their company. And it was fascinating to watch someone in him essentially rewiring that business while the lights were on, because they've got a really demanding logistics business to run. So that was the first thing. The second thing was, as they went through lockdown, they essentially found themselves in partnership with their major competitor, who they've competed with for years and years. Part of the UK government's challenge for people who are vulnerable was to try and get them food packs. And there were only a couple of companies, apart from the supermarkets or the grocery store, the big grocery chains, who've got the delivery capability to do it, but impossible for them in a way because they're maxed out trying to deliver for their own customers. Is that we've got a couple of companies in the UK that have the capability to be able to provide people who are vulnerable with these food packs. And Andrew led with, I think, his competitor on the other side, and they formed, a partnership to be able to solve this huge national challenge rapidly. I mean, it's one of the most remarkable things I've seen. The reason why I think it works so well, my personal view, is because he's a heavy believer in decentralized management and leadership. So in those depots, in those locations, the culture is very much owned locally. So I think it was interesting for us to look at the difference between more command and control organizations and more decentralized cultures. Decentralized cultures, certainly, in my experience, as we went through COVID, performed much better. It seemed to be that they were much easier to operate than the real command and control organizations. Great for military, not great when you're in that situation.
Did you say about the military?
I've got no experience in the military, but I'm saying maybe command and control works really well in the military. But I'm saying in a corporate setting, as we go through a moment like COVID, it definitely didn't work as well as more decentralized.
Employee engagement and decentralized leadership, what you've been just talking about.
Mm.
Andrew emphasizes empowering his teams and promoting decentralized decision-making within Bidcorp UK.
Mm.
How does he ensure alignment between individual empowerment and maintaining consistent levels across different regions or departments? And could you elaborate on any specific challenges he faced in implementing and sustaining these decentralized approach?
Well, one of the things I got to experience firsthand, I went to one of the depots, which is in the middle of the country near a big city called Birmingham in the UK. And I got to go out on a few different shifts with guys who work there. And I went out for one of the shifts delivering food to various customers, chefs of theirs, food franchise companies. And we get to one of them, And it was fascinating because as we were approaching this lady to give her the food that she'd ordered, the driver told me that we didn't have everything that she'd ordered, right? So there's going to be a problem because she's going to be mad. This was the middle of summer in a very big tourist area, and we don't have the stuff that she's ordered. So it's bad for her because she's going to lose money today. So as we approach, I'm thinking, how's he going to handle this? And what this guy did was exceptional. He absolutely owned, right, why they hadn't did it. The easiest thing to do as a delivery driver would be to say the guys in the depot messed up. I'm so sorry, they messed up, right? That's the easiest thing to do. What he did was, it was his mess up. He owned it. He took accountability for it. And it was remarkable. Obviously, you can see immediately she wasn't happy. But, and then what happened as we got back to the food depot was quite remarkable, Mark, because we got to go through this sort of debrief moment. And then the next morning at 10 o'clock, they had this, and this was in this particular depot, they had this service circle meeting. So at 10 o'clock the next morning, they sit and discussed everything that happened over the last 24 hours. And I think this was one of the most unbelievable things that happens through this business that, again, was, from what I understand, was really led by Andrew, was to be able to ensure that every part of the organization doesn't go more than 24 hours, essentially, from checking in with reality. So if you think about the infrequency of how many leadership teams get together, it could be 3-6 months, could be 12 months. What you find in these decentralized depots is that the leadership team essentially are getting together every morning at 10 o'clock, which means by default, they're not going more than 24 hours without rechecking what reality is. The fascinating thing I find in many larger organizations is those leadership teams don't check reality on a regular basis. And what happens in the absence of checking in on reality? Story seeps in, myth seeps in, drama seeps in, falsehood seep in. So, what we found at BidFood, again, is this exceptional, very simple process that, again, was championed by Andrew, heavily decentralized, owned locally. That means these companies, even though they might be employing 300-400 people, they operate and feel much more like an ultra small micro company in how responsive they are to the customer.
Balancing the triple bottom line. Companies have been talking about that for a very long time. Andrew mentions BidCorp's commitment to the triple bottom line, results, reputation, relationship. How does he measure and evaluate success in these areas, particularly when sometimes they compete or conflict with each other? And for instance, how does BidCorp prioritize between financial results and maintaining a strong reputation or fostering employee engagement?
Well, I mean, the first part I don't know the answer to. I mean, we'll have to. Maybe we can get him on the podcast with you. He's fantastic, but I think it'd be a brilliant guest to get on. So maybe we can let him answer that because I can't answer that for them. In terms of the engagement side, they have, without a doubt, again, one of the strongest engagement scores. I think last year they won for the industry the highest engagement award as well. So again, it's exceptional engagement.
Adapting to modern workforce expectations. The chapter in chapter 4 emphasizes moving away from traditional performance appraisals toward more frequent informed conversations. How have companies like Adobe and IBM successfully transitioned to this approach, and what challenges did they face during implementation, and was it successful?
Well, I mean, I guess only they can really be the judge. But from what I've seen, I would absolutely advocate that it's a great idea to move away from this more sort of structured, heavy, formalized process to much more infrequent conversations and check-ins. If, and it's a big if the capability of the managers is right. So, we found quite a few organizations who would follow suit and say, this is a great idea, which it is in principle. In practice, you're kind of in a way giving managers a big problem. You're giving them a big headache. And in a way, you're setting them up to lose because they've not got the capability to have those kind of regular coaching conversations you would need to have. And I think, I don't know, based on your experience, if you think back of the managers you've bumped into, and I've had a varied set of experiences over the years with different managers I've worked for. You think some of them would cope really well with that. It would be excellent. Some of them, it'd be horrific, actually. So, because it would mean that we probably never talk. And I would feel like I'm not being developed and not being grown, and therefore I probably vote with my feet and leave.
I think, when you're managing really smart, talented people, they want to be stretched.
Yeah.
They want to be challenged. They want to get better. And the mediocre ones don't want any of that. And so you can't keep the good ones if you're not doing that, right? I mean, that's probably what you've experienced, that you've seen in other companies, that the
Yeah.
really good companies are able to keep really smart people by trying to understand them, understand their strengths and weaknesses, and where they can help them improve and get to the next level.
Well, I lecture at one of the business schools on the MBA program and the International Masters program. And the MBA program really fascinated me. And I've done that over the years, both here in London and also in Dubai. And I'd say most of the MBA students I meet who have been funded by the organizations and big corporations they work for, and obviously I won't name any of those, want to leave, right? So, and it's interesting because most leaders I come across say, we're going to make a really important decision. We're going to invest in MBA programs for our top talent. And you're thinking, what a waste, right? Because the idea is that's going to be like some sort of talent retention tool. Actually, it's the opposite. And what often happens during the MBA process is people have got ambition. They're entrepreneurial, and they feel like the organizations that they're in aren't for them anymore. They meet someone on the MBA program, they have an idea for a startup, and they want out. And you think most organizations are not selling the benefits of the development opportunities that could exist for you to be more entrepreneurial. I think it's such an own goal. So I had this argument, actually. It was with one of the grad recruiters from one of the banks in the UK, mainly because I'd been, this experience time and time again at the universities. And I said to them, they don't want to work for you. And the reason why I know this for sure, Mark, is I'm be interested in your experience too. But at the beginning of most of these lectures, I'll ask a question and say, how many of you want to go and work for a company? And you get a few hands up. How many of you want to build your own company? You get like 70% of the hands go up. And how many of you already got your own company? And you'll get a few of those go up. But the majority of people don't want to work for companies that are 21, 22 years old. Then what I ask is the companies that you do want to work for, who are they? And you get the obvious, right? You get the BlackRocks and the Goldman Sachses and the blah, blah, blah. Right. You say, right, why those companies? Well, because, and the answer is, if I was to generalize the answer is, well, if I work for those companies for 2 to 3 years, I'll get the experience I need to get out and run my own company. So they're a stepping stone anyway. So I went to one of these big banks and I said to them, this is insane because I know this company. You guys have got 50,000 people in the bank and you've got unbelievable opportunities for people to grow, develop and become entrepreneurial, but you don't sell any of that. And they said to me, well, it's rubbish. Everyone wants to work for us. I said, well, of course they do. They're not going to come to the interview and say, well, my plan is to be here 2-3 years, then I'm out. They want you as a stepping stone, as a brand on their resume. But you're not selling the benefits of what actually is there, which is you could sharpen all of your entrepreneurial skills over 5 to 10 years and leave as an awesome leader, but they don't sell that.
We have a question from the audience. As AI matures in organizations, how must successful and ambitious managers deal with the rapid changes in human deployment and concerns among rank and file with the tenure concerns and subsequent impacts on decreased motivation and reduced productivity and impaired competitiveness in a worldwide market? It's a mouthful.
Wow, what a question. Well, I guess if I could answer that personally, again, as a manager, essentially of a small team, embracing it, right? So I don't think there's now a day from the live streams we run to the imagery we create to the way we analyze data from Excel spreadsheets to the content we produce where we're not using AI. I think every day involves using AI in some description in what we do. So it doesn't feel in any way at odds with managing the team or with growing the team or with driving performance. It's become a sidearm and part and parcel of everything that we do.
What do you recommend to your clients about, they say, AI, there's so much to it. How do we really use this in terms of leading people and improving their skill sets and identifying the right people? What do you tell people about how to take advantage of AI?
Well, the answer is an uncomfortable truth, which is learn how to use it. I don't think many do. I genuinely don't think many people do. So most leaders I come across, we have a client, I'll be careful what I say about them, but they're a big organization. And I was with their leadership team and we took one of their strategies and, live in front of them with the leadership team, we got ChatGPT 4.0, put it up, investigated their strategy, and they have like quite a significant issue with the regulator in the industry. and we got them to observe it live, and it blew them away. I mean, you're talking, this sounds very ageist as an age demographic, but you're talking, actually, that's not necessarily just the case. They're probably in their 50s largely, and they'd never interacted with AI at all. One of the other things we did, Mark, which was quite interesting, was there's another business. They're pretty big. They're listed on the stock market here. They've been in business for 40 years, and their market cap is 1.2 billion pounds, or what, 1.5 billion dollars. One of the things that we showed them was Pepe coin. So I don't know if you're much into cryptocurrency, but Pepe coin in 7 days went from zero valuation to $1.5 billion valuation. So what we showed them was what took them 40 years to do. You know, these couple of kids somewhere on a computer have done this in like 7 days. And of course they laughed, they scoffed at it like this is stupid and foolish, right? But I don't think it is stupid and foolish, because what this is showing us as a company, as I was explaining to them, is the changing shift in attention and the value of attention, and these guys are capitalizing on it. So you need to really understand and learn, because your business could benefit massively. But there is a barrier. They don't want to learn. It feels too complex, too difficult. Where do they begin? Maybe you kind of figure someone at some point would have come up with a plan to educate business leaders on basic AI stuff, because they all talk about it, but no one really is experimenting, from my experience.
Balancing positive feedback with developmental goals. You mentioned the importance of maintaining a healthy ratio of positive to developmental feedback during appraisals. Could you provide specific strategies or examples of how managers can effectively structure their feedback sessions to achieve the balance?
Great question. So we would argue to look at sort of three key things, three key phases of that discussion or the conversation, to look at the setup, the execution, and the follow-up. And if you think about the discipline, to have a well-prepared one-to-one conversation and performance review or appraisal conversation with someone, then the execution of it, really thinking about the environment, thinking about the messaging, thinking about the emotion that you'd want them to leave that conversation with, and then what happens after the conversation for the remaining, 2 to 4 weeks, perhaps after that, is such an important discipline to really think through. And it's not necessary that everyone needs that sort of discipline or everyone wants that, but I think it's a healthy way to approach it. And we would argue that's a nice, neat structure to work through. Also, when it comes through to then looking at the last 3 to 6 months in terms of someone's performance, what we ask, and this is a piece of advice I got early on, actually, when I joined Anderson, my boss said to me at the time, make a small folder in your email account and make it for, like, call it your glory file. And every successful email you get, anyone who praises you, anyone who says thank you, you put it in there, you put it in there, you put it in there, because we're not going to revisit this conversation until 6 months' time. And he said to me, what did you do this time last week? I said, I don't know. He said, exactly. So there's no way you're going to remember positive stuff that happened 6 months ago. So I thought it was such a great tip, is what we advise managers to do, to keep recording this stuff. And then as part of the first part of the conversation, to review these successes. And I think it's tremendously important, certainly with building people's self-esteem. And also, I mean, I don't know about many of the organizations maybe listening in or might be listening in, but I think most companies are pretty challenged when it comes to the finances. And this can be a contentious issue, even though it seems like headline numbers look good, profit numbers look good, but there might be increasing debt, there might be obligations, there might be investment decisions to be made, which actually means in the real world, even though it seems like we've made lots more money this year, I'm being told I'm going to get a 3, 4, 5% pay rise. And that feels at odds here with how well we seem to be doing. So it puts managers in a very difficult position to be able to defend that, when often those managers themselves have no clue of what the finances of the company are. And the easiest thing, again, like the delivery driver, is for the manager to say, well, if it was my money, I'd pay you more. And then they all sit there and say, yeah, but actually it's impossible, because the managers are as in the dark as the team members themselves.
Cultural and generational considerations. This comes up big all the time when you're teaching at a university. Given the diverse workforce demographics today, including millennials and Gen Z, how do you recommend managers adapt their communication styles and feedback approaches to resonate effectively with these different age groups? And are there specific techniques or best practices you've seen work well across different generations in the workplace?
I think a great place to take a cue from is to look at how people interact with social media content. So again, obviously not prying into people's lives, but it'd be quite useful if you got people in your team and you're, even observing the way that they might interact with LinkedIn or with X or with something that's publicly visible, of course. It can be really useful to try and get a feel for how they interact with the outside world other than you. Because often as a manager, people can relate to you and communicate with you in a certain way, which isn't the same as how they communicate and engage with other people. So I think, again, it's more empathy of trying to get a read of where they're at and starting to engage and communicate with them in a way that is commensurate with the way that you're probably going to feel is going to get the very best from them. Not easy, right? Not easy to do. And I think it requires a lot of time and effort to start to understand those individuals too.
Yeah, and some folks don't want to put that kind of effort into it. In chapter 5, could you elaborate on how world-class managers balance the need to be perceived as busy and important with the actual effectiveness of their management strategies?
Well, yeah, we looked at one of the common words that's used in business, and it's certainly prevalent here in the UK. And you say to someone, "How you doing, Mark?" And the response is, "Oh, I am manic." And it's an interesting choice of word, right? This is like one of the common words in the business lexicon.
Is that English? I mean, like, is that something that in England, that's what they say? I never hear
Yeah,
that in the US.
it's a very common thing to say. And the word manic, of course, we're talking about like a mania. It's like an
Mhm.
insanity, but it's a manicness. And the reason why is because often that's kind of rewarded and applauded in a weird way. If someone was if you were to get into the lift in your office and say to someone, how are you doing? And someone says, "I'm good. I'm actually decided to take the entire day to just do nothing and think about strategically where this organization's going and how we get there." People would look at you like, have you lost your mind?
Mhm.
I think this is a really interesting area because we know from what we'd picked up from, actually, we got to see Jim Collins speak a few years ago. And one of the things that he'd said to the audience was, in his observation of looking at great leaders and great CEOs, they tended to spend more time than the average of actually stopping and thinking about what was actually going on in those companies. You can sort of equate it to, and my cousin is a psychotherapist, psychoanalyst, and he works with young people with football. And says about this moment, and I love the analogy. It's like a great football player, like a Messi or someone, will stop for a brief moment and put their foot on the ball, and it's a pause in the midst of the game in order to read the field of play and make the right decision, right? But they can do that at speed, and I think there's one of the things that, often people don't pause. It's not valued. So again, I think it's one of the really important areas to look at.
When I was 29, I became head of, I was selected to start what became a very large trade association. And my boss was the founder of a big biotech company.
Mm.
And he insisted that every Friday lock myself in my office and don't do anything but think. He said, "I just
Wow.
want you to think from 8:30 to noon. Just
Huh.
think. I don't want you to open your laptop. You can make some notes on a legal paper, but I don't want anybody disturbing you. I just want you to think about what you want to do with this organization and how you're going to grow it, and what kind of resources you need to grow it, and how we're going to be one of the biggest in the world." Because I had 17 board members, 15 who ran public companies that they started.
Wow.
So it was a very, aggressive, successful group. And I found that it was smart to go and just spend time thinking as opposed to actually doing, because we're all so busy wanting to do all the time, right?
Yeah, totally.
Here's my last question for you. And the hour just went way too fast. And
Yeah,
we
I
have
just saw the time as well. Wow.
yeah. Considering the increase in remote work and its impact on meeting frequency, what strategies do you suggest for maintaining effective communication without over relying on meetings? Because I read in the Wall Street Journal
Hmm.
that that people who are working remotely feel more burned out from meetings now working remotely than they did when they were in person.
Yeah. Can I give you some meeting stats? This is based on some of our
Yeah.
research, right? So we've got of the 100,000 managers who've been through our program, we've got data on about 15,500 managers. So it's a pretty reliable data set. And some of the things from meetings. Actually, we did some of this original research in Vietnam, interestingly enough. But we found that most managers would say that they spend two thirds of their week is spent in meetings, and about a third of that time is tends to be seen as valuable. We also found that 70% of people admitted to bringing other work to meetings, especially when we're dealing with remote work. So, if people's cameras are off, there's a high likelihood they're not doing anything to do with the meeting that you think they're there for. And then we also found that it was 39% of managers admitting to falling asleep in meetings as well remotely, which I thought was a compelling stat. So just buy some pillows and duvets for people. So I think the meetings one is a big one. And what we would argue is a good exercise, practical exercise, is take the diary over the last month and the next month, look at how many meetings are in there. And again, it's just with the team as a manager, working through what can we stop, delete, let go of, stop going to, as a way to reduce the meeting number, which is great. The other thing is, of course, then the meetings that we do have, and certainly this is more, maybe this is a cultural thing here, because I noticed my colleagues in the Netherlands are much more effective with time. But, in the UK, we would spend the first 10 to 15 minutes talking about everything other than the thing we're there to talk about. But we could probably get most meetings done in 15 to 20 minutes. But we don't, because we utilize the time, but it has a cost.
Wayne, as I said, it went way too quick. I hope we'll have you back again when you write another book.
Oh, I'd love to. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Everyone, have a wonderful weekend. We look forward to seeing you all next week. Take care.
Thanks, Mark.